A boating accident forces a man to think of better times in the past. I discuss this and more on today's episode. Welcome back to Around the Weird, a booktube channel where I talk about all the unusual and out of the ordinary literature that I found in my travels. Today it is Short Story Tuesday, so I want to talk about an interesting short story from an author that I've talked about on this channel before. Today's short story is all about boats and goats. I am referring to Government Goat by Susan Glaspell, which was published in 1919. I've talked about Susan Glaspell on this channel before. You can refer to my video on A Jury of Her Peers, which I made a couple of years ago for more information about her. But for those who don't know, she was a writer, wrote a lot of plays and short stories, and it continues to be published to this day. People publishing collections of her work. And she's mostly known for A Jury of Her Peers, which I consider to be one of the best short stories that I've read for this channel. She also worked as a journalist, and that might have sort of influenced a lot of what she wrote about. But without further ado, let's talk about Government Goat. I will do a summary, a little bit of analysis, and we will move on from there. So, Government Goat focuses on Joe Doane. He is a father, a family man working in the fishing industry in a fishing town on a cape. At the beginning of the story, we learned that a boating accident has killed a number of the men in the community, including that of the Cadaras family, an immigrant family, a Portuguese immigrant family that is now in mourning, and everyone is sort of taking pity on them, trying to help them and make them feel better in this troubling time. But Joe remarks that everyone's taking pity on them so that they kind of have everything taken care of, whereas other people might not. And he even starts making jokes, like his wife remarks that someone gave the Cadaras family like a fireless cooker, and he's like, you could have one too if you didn't have a husband anymore, and everyone just sort of no sells his joke, and he finds that eventually it becomes quite lonely to tell those jokes if nobody is participating. And eventually the Cadaras family gets a government goat, and the family notes that they want a similar goat, but Joe says that's not really possible unless I die, or unless someone significant to the family dies as well, and the goat just seems to be provided by the government to take care of the family or to provide milk or something like that. It should be noted, Joe thinks about how his family had money once. They were prominent whalers and fishermen in the community, but unfortunately the family fell on hard times and they sold the boat, and the fishing area kind of ran out of fish as it did during that time. And so now Joe kind of has to provide for the family, working in a storage industry, working in the fishing industry, and he doesn't really seem to like the kind of work that he's doing. And so when he reflects on what's happening with the Cadaras family, he's a little racist about it because they're Portuguese, but he also wonders, what's his role? What is he supposed to do to provide for his family if the family doesn't seem to be happy about things? And so eventually it gets to a point where he's just like, the family wants me gone, I guess I'll die. And he goes off and tries to drown himself with the high tide and whatnot. Unfortunately, at that time, the goat is also there, and Joe's just like, you got yourself stuck, go back to shore. I'm going to help you get to shore. And he carries the goat back to shore at that point. And his family and the Cadaras family are there now, and the Cadaras family is happy that he managed to save their goat. His family remarks, how happy they are to have their father around. I think also, his son even, says to the Cadaras son, you don't have a father, you're fatherless. And Joe just tells him to knock it off as the story comes to a close there. In terms of analysis, there is quite a bit worth talking about with Government Goat. One of the main ideas of the story is that of comparison. Joe's family is essentially comparing themselves to the Cadaras, really everyone else in this city, in this cape that they live in. And they feel like compared to the Cadaras, they're better and worse off because, their family wasn't kind of hurt by this, the boat sinking, the boating disaster that happened, and Joe is present there and able to provide for the family. But they also seem to be worse off because the Cadaras' family is now being provided for by the government. They got a government goat, they got a fireless cooker, they got all these things that seem to be making their life a little bit easier, and Joe's family does not have any of that. Like, they couldn't even afford that on Joe's like meager salary. They can't help but compare themselves for all the good and bad that's happening there. And Joe even seems to be making that weird joke, which no one else seems to want to participate in, about like, yo, if you want this, just, let me die, and you can have that. The government will provide for you. Like, everyone kind of remarks how awful that joke is. Even the narrator, it doesn't seem to think that it's a good joke. In making that joke, he is comparing himself to the Cadaras family and really a lot of other people in the community. And ultimately, it leads him to question if he's good enough. Like, eventually, he's like, yeah, would things be better if I was dead? Am I even providing for my family? Am I a good man? I think Glaspell is really showing, the problems of comparison. If you do that, you can't accept, the beautiful things that you have in your life, your wonderful family and things like that. You think times might be hard, but if you're constantly comparing yourself to a grief-stricken family, it's going to warp your mind a little bit. And then related to that, Glaspell's also talking about the better times of the past, the halcyon days where things were working out better for the family. The Doane family in particular were once successful whalers, successful fishermen, and now Joe can barely seem to be able to provide for his family. Like, he gets his daughter a gift that she kind of wanted, and his wife remarks, it would have been better had you gotten her something that would have been useful, noting they can't really afford to spend, carelessly. They have to think about, and everything has to kind of have utility. Coming from, a lower class background myself, that's a very familiar kind of mindset right there. But that does lead to frustration for Joe. Knowing that he can't provide for his family in that way, give them niceties, give them the luxuries, things that they don't really need, but they kind of want. And he's not really successful in sort of like crafting that stuff either. It should be noted. There is a good quote that I would like to read to you from this. He wondered why things were this way with him. They seemed to have just happened so. When you should have some money, it didn't come natural to do the things of people who have no money. The money went out of the bank fishing about 3 years before his father sold his vessels. During those last 3 years, Captain Silas Doane had spent all the money he had to keep things going, refusing to believe that the way of handling fish had changed, and that the fishing between Cape's End and the Grand Banks would no longer be what it had been. And that's a really interesting quote because it just sort of gets at the times that were. Like, his family had money, but because of bad financials, because of times changing, because of overfishing, perhaps things are no longer that way, and it sort of creates a sort of dread, a frustration, and anxiety of how you might return to those days. And if you see the Cadaras family, like if you see them kind of doing a little bit better than you, not that much better, after all, their husband, the father figure, is dead there, and hearing what your family is saying, wanting those sort of things but not being able to have them, it only highlights your lackings. Like, what am I doing wrong? Like, that I'm not able to have the same success that my ancestors, that my father and grandfather and those people were able to sort of have. Being so near to the past and, having all these reminders, again, it draws you to compare, and that creates a huge problem. I will also note that there is some racism in this story. particularly as Joe is thinking about the Cadaras. He notes they're Portuguese, and why should they have what my family, a white family, doesn't have? And there's some element of racism there. I don't think Glaspell is leaning into it or condoning it or saying the Portuguese should not have that. More, I think it's very easy to fall into racism, and I think if there's a number of politicians who would have probably capitalized on that at the time, and even continue to capitalize on that today, rather than trying to make things better for the family who has little. They're targeting the immigrant family, and then they're saying, oh, if I target this immigrant family, those of you who have little might have more, even though they're not doing anything to make it so that other family has more. They're just preying on the weak and the vulnerable as a way to raise their own profile and gain more power in the world. I don't think Glaspell's really focusing on that, but I should note how easy it is to kind of fall into that trap of thinking there. The last thing I'll note is that of the sea. Glaspell makes big use of the sea in this story, the ocean. There's a constant focus on the tide in particular. Doane notes, tide goes in, tide goes out, tide goes in, tide goes out. A constant sort of thing in his life. There's a sense of certainty there that there might not be for Doane and his family. The Cadaras family lost their father at sea, so again, the sea takes. The sea is kind of unforgiving in that way, and although the Doane family made their money at sea, they also quickly lost it, and so again, there's that sense of uncertainty and what the future will bring that the sea itself seems to maintain. They're on the Cape. There's a lot of visitors there, so you're kind of surrounded by that ocean. You're surrounded by something that seems certain, whereas again, you're not so certain. And then again, as the Cadaras father died at sea, Joe tries to drown himself at sea, and in doing so, he manages to find his certainty again. Now, it does seem like a bit of an optimistic ending, but I will note this doesn't address all of Joe's problems. Like, yes, his family thinks that he's the hero today, but will they think that tomorrow when they struggle to find food, when they struggle to find a job or money or things that they need? I think rather you're seeing a slice of Joe's life, and things might progressively get worse from there, or he might kind of be stuck in this stasis until he dies. So a bit of an interesting ending. Like it's optimistic, but it doesn't necessarily solve all the problems that are there for Joe, that are there for many people like Joe in this community. Anyway, those are my thoughts on Government Goat. A solid short story, not one of the best, but pretty interesting. One that I think you might check out. It's very hard to say that this is like the worst that Glaspell has done, but I will note, starting off with A Jury of Her Peers, which again is one of the best short stories, it's really hard for anything to come close to that, but this is still pretty good, so I highly recommend that you seek that out. I will put a link to it in the description. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Otherwise, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so that other people can find this short story or learn more about this author if they don't already know. And until then, I wish you the best of luck in your weird and goat-based travels. Farewell.